Hello, good evening. Hope you've had a good day and a good week. Thank you for joining Karis and I for this evening session. Hopefully you've arrived, you've got your cup of tea and biscuits. Hi to Lee. He sent me a message earlier on saying that he was prepared. He was a bit too early. So he had finished all his biscuits way before we had even started. So he had to go out and get a second pack of biscuits. So hopefully you haven't eaten them all, Lee. But yeah, good stuff. Right. Shall we get straight into it, Karis?
Let's.
Let's do it. Cool. Let me bring up my screen and we will crack on. So here we go. So yeah, thanks for joining us. We did a previous live stream of dusting off the old talk of surveying trees for bats and posed the question, can we do better? And Karis and I presented this presentation at the Bat Conference, and I also presented it at the Tree Conference, but wanted to share it to a wider audience for those people who weren't able to join us at those sessions, or even if you did. We're going to have some hidden extras this time. We've got more slides, we've got some more videos, and due to some strong arming by Karis, we have even more graphs for all of you graph nerds out there. I can see she looks very happy at the moment. And so, yes, let's crack on. So, to kind of bring us up to speed, we talked about how challenging it is to survey trees for bats and the kind of low encounter rates that we experience by kind of standard survey effort. And a few years ago, I started trialing the use of trail cameras and deploying these on trees in the hope to see we can record bats using this technology rather than relying on manual survey efforts. And from an initial deployment, we had some good success. So within the first month, we recorded bats going back into trees. So we had confirmation that these roosts were being used. And these were much more successful than the manual survey effort that happened the year before. And then on a different tree here, you can see another bat going back in. And if you slow the video down, you can actually pick out that that's a Beckstein's bat. So it's not the best video, but not only do we have bats, but we have confirmation of species as well. And we tried this on 4 trees initially. These were all Beckstein's maternity roosts found through radio tracking. And the previous year, we had checked these once a month using manual surveys, and we'd only found bats on 1 occasion. So only one of those roosts, the one in the bottom right, we actually confirmed bats using them through 12 surveys. Having deployed the trail cameras the following year, so had them out for an entire year, we actually confirmed bat usage in 3 out of 4 of those trees. So a significant improvement from this kind of basic kind of upgrade in our approach. And originally, kind of had these cameras hung upside down and very quickly realized that's not the best idea really, because they're not designed to be hung upside down and they very quickly attract some water. But despite that, we proved the concept and wanted to pick this up and take it forward. So got our heads together and thought about, okay, well, let's see where we go next with this, and put a funding application together and approached the People's Trust for Endangered Species, the Arb Association, and asked if they could support us and provide us some funding so we could continue this research project. So this research project has 2 strands. The first one is using trail cameras to survey trees for bats. And the second strand is looking at whether we can create bat roosts in trees by cutting holes in them, and still were very kind in supporting us and providing us some chainsaws to aid in that process. So we upgraded our gear, and this is what we're going to be talking about this evening and sharing our results from the last couple of years of having these cameras out on known roost trees. So as you can see in the photo here, we kind of doubled up the number of cameras we have, and the idea was to try and test one taking photos and the other taking videos to see if there's any difference between that. We also upgraded our brackets as well. So whereas we had previously hung them upside down on these fairly small brackets with limited mobility and could only place them in certain locations, we upgraded to these much more substantial brackets, and you can see the 2 cameras there on the right-hand side. And we went out, we deployed them on more trees, we did some more radio tracking. So in total, we have about 10 Beckstein's roosts currently being monitored. We have, I think, just 3 Barbastelle roosts. We originally had 6, but unfortunately, the lifting bark, which was the roost feature for that species, on 3 of them had fallen off the tree, so it's no longer usable. We also included a couple of woodpecker holes, which were known nocturnal roosts as well. So we have a mix of different species, but primarily Bechstein's bats. And a huge thank you to Sean at Arbology, Lee at Grounded Trees, and Mark at Sharpeville Tree Services for helping out with this project. Could not have done it without you, so thank you very much. So what you've all been waiting for is, what did we find? I'm going to hand over to Karis to tell you a bit more.
Thank you, Jim. So I looked at a year's worth of camera trap data, just photos, and this produced a really expansive data set. We had 169,000 photos from that deployment. And that was 14 different roosts at the Tortworth estate. So after removing the erroneous footage, so where maybe the camera had fallen or vegetation had covered the lens, black images, that sort of thing, it provided us with a data set of 131,000 photos. These were manually processed to record bat presence, but also other species as well, and then also bat behavior, and it was divided into these 5 categories. This data set was also applied to run 6 generalized additive models as well to investigate the relationship between environmental variables like precipitation and minimum temperature on bat activity as detected by the camera traps. And here are some of the results. You can see here that about 50% of the total bat detections were from re-entry behaviors. Only 2.4% was emergence behavior. I'll come back to that in a minute. But what we really want to achieve with this approach is to confirm if a feature is an active bat roost. So to get an understanding of this, we omitted the flying records, because although flying is most likely a precursor to re-entry or perhaps post-emergence, we couldn't be sure, because the cameras are placed a little bit away from the feature, it is plausible that the bat has just flown by. So we omitted them to take a precautionary approach. Even with that, 87% of the bat detections could be used to confirm a roost, proving proof of concept. So coming back to emergences then, this is probably not a huge surprise. This is what we found. The camera would trigger, but too late to capture such a small and fast moving animal. Here's another example, but this illustrates where the camera does work. So you can see it's triggered there, but it's missed that first bat, but caught the second one. And this is quite important because bats are social and they roost in groups. This increases our chance of detecting this emergence behavior, even though the odds are a little bit against us. This is the accompanying camera trap that was on this feature, and you can see the bat emerging quite clearly. So this does still work for emergencies, but it's not quite as successful as for re-entry behavior. This leads to the second half of analysis 1, which is looking at species, whether we can identify what species is present in the footage. So we looked at Bechstein's, Barbastell's, and nocturnal roosts, as Jim mentioned. So we looked whether or not we could use these species diagnostic features to identify what species was detected. And here's some of the results. We've got some awesome footage, really incredible, and not just Barbastell, nocturnal, and Bechstein's were captured. We've got other bat species as well, pipistrelles, and Myotis species. You can see on the right, there's some Natteras re-entering the feature there. Lovely footage of a nocturnal scent marking outside the hole in the middle and a woodpecker hole. And although the majority of the footage that we could identify to species level was nocturnals because they're so conspicuous, their behavior outside the roost feature, we did get some lovely footage of Barbastells as well, which is, we weren't really sure if this was going to be possible, as they do exploit these more concealed and cryptic features like flaking bark. And this leads into when camera traps really lend themselves to this approach. If they can see into the hole, the keen-eyed among you will notice that this is a nocturnal roost. And this is why I think about 60% of our bat detections identified to species level were nocturnal. And it's because they exploit these open hole features with a wide aperture where the camera can see inside. So we get a lot of extra footage that you just wouldn't get otherwise without this approach. Interestingly, this roost as well, the bats were utilizing, they weren't going up into the feature, they were utilizing it to the side, which is contrary to some current recommendations in industry guidance. Here's just a little summary of the results from analysis 1. So you can see on the right here, we've got our activity radial graphs, and this is supported really by current literature. You can see Bechstein's majority of detections occur after midnight, supporting that there are later emergent species, and the opposite is true for nocturnal. The majority occur before midnight. Barbastell's a little bit more erratic, but these features were also occupied by pipistrelles, so that likely influenced the detections there. In terms of the generalized additive models, we found that there was significant positive effect, unsurprisingly, between bat activity and months and minimum temperature. Interestingly, though, we can see that there was some bat activity not only below 5 degrees or below 0 degrees, but down to -8, which is really remarkable. This was all from the Barbastelle roosts, which is perhaps not surprising as they're a bit more of a resilient species, but really incredible, -8. Who would have thought that a bat would be flying around in the woodland? This leads us on to the next couple of analyses. And to achieve this, what I did is allocate a binary value to each day for bat presence or absence, or 1 or a 0. For analysis 2, this enabled us to make a comparison with current industry guidance for emergence and re-entry surveys, so dawn and dusk surveys. We'll move on to the next one. These are the key results then. This is the key sort of takeaway from this analysis. We found that using these this data set, and if you conducted up to 3 surveys with the standard method of dawn or dusk approach, you would have a less than 30% chance of detecting bats. And this is on known roosts of known occupancy. We know these roosts have bats in them, yet still, if you only perform 3 surveys, which is the current industry guidance, you would have less than a 30% chance of detecting bats. To reach a reasonable likelihood of about 50% chance of bat detection, you'd need to do significantly more, around about 10 or 11, and to reach something even higher than that, say 80%, you would have to do around 30 odd surveys, which is not achievable really in the survey season.
Wicked. Thank you, Karis. I think my slide advancing skills could land me a job at the Home Office, couldn't it? During COVID times. Whoa, I think I've got a new career lined up for me. Apologies for terrible. Laura's in the background was feeding the dogs and they just started barking manically. Luckily, I was on mute. But anyway, so we've heard about the kind of the low detection rates, which we already knew based on previous studies, the fact that when we go looking for bats in trees, we're just not very likely to find them on a small number of visits. So this concurred with what we already knew. So what can we find out then? So Karis pointed out that we recorded quite a few bats re-entering trees, and this presumably is because of that behavior of them landing and taking off and landing and taking off, which gives the camera sufficient time to trigger and record that activity. We've also recorded a range of different species. So the roosts that we were working on initially, the vast majority were Bechsteins. We had a few Barbastelles and a couple of nocturnal roosts. In the Bechstein's roost, we're getting nocturnal bats, we're getting Daubenton's, we're getting Natterer's bats. In the Barbastelle roost, we're getting Brandt's bats. We're also getting some common pipistrelles as well. So gone are the days really where we look at a tree and say, okay, we have found the roost in that tree. It's total nonsense that if it's suitable for one species, it's going to be suitable for multiple species, because why would it lie dormant for the vast majority of the year? So what else can we tell? So we can pick up that we've got bats. We can also pick up the species. We may also be able to pick up some additional markers as well. So if you have a look, there's a bat just in the kind of bottom right of this photo, and we have a series of photos to kind of see as it kind of progresses towards the entrance. I don't quite know why it landed so far away from the entrance, but as this bat progresses up, we can see it making a march towards the roost here. And if I just pause there, what have we got here? Well, we have got a mother Bechstein's bat with its young tucked under its wing. From this series of photos, we can confirm that this roost is a maternity roost. Fantastic, right? We're going to watch the bats go into the rest of the hole. Whoop. Off they go. There we go. What else are we picking up then? So some of the criticisms leveled at trail cameras was just that around the kind of trigger time, and they're just not fast enough to catch bats. And Karis has already pointed out, okay, that's true in some occasions, perhaps most of the occasions when they come out of the roost. Not so necessarily when they go into the roost. But that kind of also forgets that bats won't always be wanting to disappear very quickly. So I'm going to play this video again. Here we have a nocturnal bat. This is a mating roost. You can see in August there, and it is scent marking around the entrance. And I have hundreds of videos of this bat spending lots of time rubbing its scents around the entrance and even singing from inside the hole. And so therefore very nicely proving that we have mating going on. And is he successful? Yes, of course he's successful. Who wouldn't want to put a camera up and capture this type of behavior? So we're picking up different types of roosts, even from the photos, the limited photos and videos that we're capturing. We're making huge step forwards in being able to categorize the types of roosts that we have here, because we're not only recording that bats are present, the species, but we're also recording this key activity that under normal circumstances, you can see this 20 to 6 in the morning. Not many of us are going to be stood outside of a tree at 26 in the morning, 20 to 6 in the morning. Equally, not many people will spend time looking at trees in March. So normally in March, we've all kind of dragged ourselves out of the hibernation period in winter. We may be focusing on great crested newt surveys, and we haven't quite finished yet with the eDNA sets and the nets and the torches and those various things. We haven't even begun contemplating starting our bat surveys just yet. However, the bats don't care what we're doing. The bats are back in the woodland already, and we can see a number of roosts here all towards the end of March with evidence of bats already using them. And we are missing this activity following standard recommendations. What about at the other end of the season then? So we move all the way now to October, November, down the bottom left, and even December. Look at that, the day before New Year's Eve, when we're all thinking about celebrating or mourning the year that's just gone by, we still have bats in the woodland using these roosts. We've long since hung up our bat detectors and kind of packed away all of our equipment and kind of finished our bat surveys for the year. But we are missing the bats using their roosts outside of that core survey period, because our standard survey methods rely on activity during the time that we're there. And of course, during October, November, December, as we head more and more towards the cold months, towards hibernation, activity dies down, but it doesn't stop entirely. And this kind of corresponds to what we've found from manual survey efforts, where we quite often find bats in trees throughout the winter, but they don't stay still. They move from one month to another, showing there's still movement going on between trees.
So we've proven that camera traps can detect bats, and they can be deployed at times where maybe, or definitely, we wouldn't normally survey. So the next question was, how long do we need to put camera traps out for to reach a certain likelihood or threshold of probability of bat detection? So that was analysis 3. It was looking at the data we had and applying some sequential bootstrapping analysis to work that out for different focuses. So decided to break this down. So thought maybe the duration of deployment might vary depending on whether you're looking at Barbastels, Bechsteins, or noctules, whether you're looking at different PRF types, a large open feature or a more discrete feature. And also the bat season. We know that bat activity changes through the year, so it's kind of stood to reason that perhaps the duration of deployment would change as well. And this is a real summary of the result. It was quite an expansive analysis, but ultimately this is the takeaway message, that to reach about a 50% likelihood of bat detection using this footage in these trees, we found that you need to deploy the camera traps for about 2 weeks. Got the range there and the sample mean, but 2 weeks really captured either end of the spectrum. And to reach a better likelihood, 80%, it's around about 2 months. And breaking it down into those different focuses between species and PRF type did change things slightly, but basically it's the same pattern every time. Unsurprisingly, the longer that you deploy a camera trap, the more likely it is that you will detect bats. Breaking it down to different seasons didn't seem to make a huge difference, but this is analysis we'd like to repeat with another year's worth of data set as well. This is really interesting because it means that if you've got a short-term project or maybe a limited time frame, you can put a camera out for 2 weeks and theoretically reach a greater probability of bat detection than you would if you conducted 3 surveys over the complete course of the year.
Cool. So it comes back to being a numbers game. And we've known this for a while. The more trees you inspect, the more times you inspect them, the kind of greater the chance of actually finding bats. So the trail camera evidence is really just backing up what we knew already. And at this moment, I can see we've got various people watching live. So I think the screen, yes, it's slightly lagging behind. So I'm going to let it catch up a second. Just a reminder that we're going to do a bit of Q&A at the end. So if there are any questions you'd like to ask, chuck them in the chat. Laura's in the background here, so she's going to write them down and kind of bring them in so we can do our best at answering those. Before we continue, and Karis spoke there about, a couple of weeks needed in order to achieve our 50% likelihood. So more likely than not, there's still quite a low threshold, isn't it? And so one of the things I wanted to play around this year with is to work out, well, how long can we deploy these cameras for on a single charge of batteries with a single SD card? So this is the camera in question here, and I'm going to pose that question, okay? So it was set to taking photos. I set it up, I think it was in April. And how long do you think that lasted for? I'm going to pose that question. Let's see if anything comes in on the chat. Single charge of batteries, single SD card. How long did it last? Let's see what people think. I can see various people are out there. Let's give me some suggestions, people. Come on. This is much easier when you do it in person, isn't it, Karis? Because the audience are there. Like, there's no lag between me asking the question and, or there might be a lag between me asking the question and them answering, but normally they're in the room. How long do the batteries last? Okay, we can see a bid from Liam of a month. Amy thinks a month as well. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Because we then definitely could get our 50% likelihoods. So on the balance of probability, we are more likely than not to actually discover whether bats roost in that features. Oh, Sophie's being very confident there at 2 months. I like that a lot. Fantastic. Can we do any bats on 2 months? That's probably about as far as we can take it, right? What do we think? Let's put you out of your misery. So deployed this camera in April. So in April, we recorded bats on the camera. As you can see, kind of a blurry bat flying past there. Lee, 11 days. You're pessimistic, aren't you? Blimey. It's all those biscuits he's eaten this evening. So found bats in April. Also found bats in May. So the camera was running for a month. The eagle eye amongst you will see this is a Barbastelle roost, and the photo on the right there is definitely a pipistrelle. So we've got other bat species coming in here. We also found bats in June. This is a Barbastelle, the rear end of Barbastelle heading into the roost. Bear in mind, this is a single charge of batteries and single SD card. Amazingly, we had bats in July as well. And we've got more activity from Barbastelle. And it was incredible then. I know, how amazing is that we can span from April to July, right? How fantastic is that? We can really increase the likelihood of finding bats in these trees. Gone are the days where we just had to rely on, a handful of visits, a very low likelihood of finding bats. We can set these cameras up, and as you can see, lasting a number of months and actually recording bats all the way through. But that's not it. Come April, the cameras went mad. And really interestingly, this roost was found in August through radio tracking. And in August, a huge number of photos captured on this, and you can see a number of Barbastelle recorded on that. I think there's a couple in the roost feature itself, and then a couple flying around near the entrance as well. And then 2 days before I collected the camera, so I had to collect the camera in advance of the bat conference, 2 days before collecting the camera, was still recording bats on these trail cameras. So we're spanning about 4.5 months at least on a single charge and a single SD card. We can run pretty much a whole survey season, climbing the tree, deploying it once, and then collecting it at the other end. It's real potential here to significantly increase the likelihood of recording bats in tree roosts. And if we can record the bats that are there, we can protect them, because at the moment we're just stabbing in the dark, basically. So we've heard about the successes we've had. We're not saying it's perfect. What we're saying is a significant step forward. So we record a range of different bat species. We record bats using it throughout the year. They can be set up early in the year, way before we want to start doing our activity surveys. They can run much later into the year, way after the survey season ends. And on a single charge, we can show that they can be deployed for a long period of time. So in theory, you could climb the tree twice, kind of replacing what the current guidance is of maybe 3 visits. Maybe just do 2 climbs. Climb it once, inspect it, put the camera up, leave it for the survey season, come again, take it down. If you wanted an extra bit of security, you could put a climb in the middle just to make sure the batteries are still working, to make sure it hasn't moved out of position. So I've talked about the data there. We've talked about the data, but one thing I kind of realized, especially with the publication of the battery habitat key, the evidence is there and we've had it for a while, but that doesn't seem to be enough for some people. And I came across this quote: sometimes the truth isn't good enough. Sometimes people need more. Any idea who said that? Of course, it was your friend of mine. It was Batman. Of course, it was Batman. So we've heard about the data. And now, if you're not convinced by the data, I'm going to show you some of the crazy stuff we've recorded in trees to encourage you to get up and put some cameras in trees. So we've got, what do we have? We have woodpeckers. Of course, we have woodpeckers. We have woodpecker holes. It makes perfect sense that we have woodpeckers. Who wouldn't want to get a lovely film of a woodpecker visiting one of its holes? And I love this one. It's coming back in later in the year to do a bit of, I would say spring cleaning, but this is clearly autumn or winter cleaning, isn't it? So woodpeckers in the holes, fantastic. Then we've got bats coming back to find woodpeckers in the holes, and the woodpeckers not being very happy about it and seeing them off. Who wouldn't want to capture this on a camera, eh? And woodpeckers aren't the only aggressive birds that we recorded. We found plenty of owls as well, and they particularly like the brackets that we set up outside of the roost. They provide a very nice perching substrate for the owls themselves. And I think in this one here, the owl is busy chewing on something, consuming something, hopefully not a bat, hopefully another small mammal, but who knows, they do occasionally take bats. What else do we have? We have other birds, of course, and this feature was incredible. So this feature doesn't actually go anywhere. This was one of our control trees, and it was amazing the number of species that visit this feature that just doesn't go anywhere. So a minute ago you saw tawny owls. We've just had a jackdaw then. We've got a great tit coming and having a look at it. We've got nuthatches hanging around the entrance there. We've got tree creepers going up past it as well. This one I had to ask Facebook about what it was. I'm told that's a spotted flycatcher coming in there, having a look at it. And this question about whether these cameras are sensitive enough, I think this shows how sensitive they are. So this was set off by a wasp flying around the entrance to this feature. So they're pretty good at being triggered by small things. And then what else did we have turn up? We had these little fellas turning up. And not only turning up, getting fully stuck in. So going inside the hole and having a good route around. So this is one of the Bechstein's roosts. And for the eagle-eyed among you, you can see the temperature there down at -9 degrees. And I thought, oh, maybe they're forced up into the tree because the ground's frozen. And then we looked at other cameras and we found these same critters appearing elsewhere. So slightly earlier in the year, slightly warmer weather. Here we go. Another one coming to have a nose around. And perhaps this is the reason why bats move so frequently between tree roosts, because there's all these predators that are hanging around in the woodland. So we've got stoats here. It kind of stands to reason we'd have weasels as well, and historically things like pine martens. And if the bat stayed in one location for too long, they're probably more likely to fall foul to predation. So that's kind of a range of other species that we found. Let's have a look at the bats we found. So we've got some bats here performing their kind of best rendition of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody here, the 4 of them lining up for the 4 cornerstones of rock. We've got 2 Bechstein's bats having an argument about something. I'm not quite sure what they're not happy about, but clearly having a bit of a tussle and one losing the battle there and disappearing off. And then by far, and the videos that we will leave you with, by far my favorite video of them all, and I kind of teased this video beforehand, we saw this roost earlier on. So this is our nocturnal mating roost. And bear in mind here, we've got a nocturnal that's very territorial and it's full of testosterone. And it comes back and it finds a grey squirrel inside of its hole. And you might think, and I think conventional wisdom would tell us, okay, well, that if you've got a squirrel in a hole, that means that bats aren't going to use it. And a few years ago, someone recorded, I'm not sure whether it was Henry or someone else, but someone recorded a brown long-eared bat actually roosting tucked up behind a grey squirrel, kind of proving that the two can cohabit quite happily. But in this instance, first of all, the nocturnal disappears, but then kind of comes back and wants to investigate again. He's not going to give up that easy. So we kind of get to a point where squirrel's throwing some punches from inside the hole, and we have a bit of a stalemate and kind of wonder what's going to happen next. And the bat essentially thinks, well, sod it, I'm going to go in. And what happens next is just truly magical. Not least because who doesn't want to see grey squirrels having their asses handed to them by a big bat? Isn't that wonderful? And it's to kind of top it off, if that wasn't enough, just to kind of see what happens next. The next video shows the bat coming out and carrying on singing from that hole. To my mind, that bat won that argument over the grey squirrel. And have a look at the time. Look at the date, 23rd of July, about 11 o'clock at night. If there's any doubt that that bat won that fight, one of the following videos, slightly later on into the evening, we have this bat carrying on scent marking around the hole. And on the other camera that was taking photos, I've got just like a squirrel-shaped blur of the squirrel leaving and running away from the hole. And the activity and the behaviors we're recording on these are fantastic. Not only are we getting the bats, we're actually going to be better able to understand how different species interact up in the crown itself. Cool. Wow. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully that was of interest and of use. If you want to get in touch with either of us, our emails are there. If you want to kind of catch up on any of the other videos and things like that, I'm going to be sharing I've had lots of requests to share the nocturnal and squirrel fight. So that will be uploaded just as it's kind of a video on its own up to the YouTube channels relatively soon. So I think that's probably enough from us, and we shall go to see if there's any questions. Right. Have we got some questions appearing? Look at that. Thank you very much. What are the batteries that we use from Amy? So on my website, which is just batlicense.co.uk, there's a blog post and there's a full equipment list of the cameras that we use, the batteries that go into them, the boom arms, the straps, everything you need with the links to go and buy it. I quite often get asked about the cameras. I've only tried these ones, so I don't know if they're better than other ones, but they have supposedly the quickest trigger time on the market. So these are the SpyPoint Force Darks. But as I say, if you go to the website on the blog post, there's all the information there. So there's a little bit of work to do to kind of put the battery packs together. But as you've heard earlier on, definitely worth it because they have such a long kind of lasting effect if you use them. So from Liam, what level of activity are we getting across the period of recording? i.e., are there multiple triggers per night? I'll hand that to you, Karis, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely. You tend to have flurries of activity over different periods. So the second and third analysis that we did, looking at the comparison of dawn and dusk and deployment, we just looked at each day whether bats were present or not. We didn't break it down into the number of bats that were recorded for each day because that would give us a very different picture, I think, particularly as different roosts constitute a different number of individuals. So yeah, we had some really wonderful footage and very busy nights, wasn't there?
I find it fascinating. I kind of hinted at it at when I asked about the duration of the single charge of batteries, that Barbastelle roost, just the number of triggers in August. And as I say, that was when we found it via radio tracking. So that must be their kind of late summer hang, right? That they
Yeah.
finish with the school year and they're off on summer holidays and they know the tree they want to go to. They occasionally drop into it throughout the year, but come August, they want to go to, be near the beach, don't they? Near the sand and the sea. And that's why they pick that tree.
Yeah, I
Cool.
think that's the value of this approach as well. If you're putting a camera trap out there, you don't need to predict when that peak of activity is going to be, because hopefully you'll capture it.
Indeed, yeah. And I'm really looking forward to the videos that other people capture. So Lyndon Reed from Essex Bat Group sent me a few recently of the kind of different behaviors that they picked up, and he has some amazing videos of tawny owl chicks sat on a branch next to one of the roost features. And there's a whole world out there that we just have no idea what's going on. And those, I remember finding the stoat videos and photos and just thinking, wow, I've never seen a stoat up a tree. And I kind of had to then
And it's
think, I
like
was like,
18 meters up, isn't it? It's
yeah,
crazy. Just
yeah.
mad.
But it makes sense though, right?
Mhm.
Why would they hang around on the ground? I kind of had to kind of check myself, and I was like, I've only ever seen stoats at ground level, and I was like, actually, I've only ever seen 2 stoats in my life, and they were both crossing the road. Cool. I see Richard's made a comment about challenges with the uptake of night vision aids. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've talked about this before, Rich, of that we have guidance, and unfortunately, some people treat it as sacrosanct. And I know at the front it says that it's not, and it's designed to kind of be allow people to use kind of professional guidance and what have you. But fundamentally, these techniques exist and they're reasonably affordable now. So why should we not be using them? I dropped my just had a screwdriver thrown in at me. Thank you. Did you not? Okay, threw a carrot. Sorry, I dropped my drone bag earlier on and the spare propellers and the screwdriver fell out of it. So I'm glad I found that. Cool. I think we are out of questions. So thank you all for joining us. Hopefully it was of interest. If you didn't catch all of it or you want to watch it again, it will be available on the Facebook feed. I'll also download the video and put it up on the YouTube channel as well, which is just youtube.com/@batsinTrees. What else? Does exactly what it says on the tin.
We're going to take the data to publication as well, so look out for that.
More graphs.
Yeah.
Karis just wants you to say there's more graphs. Yeah, so Rich, a question about long PRF. It's interesting. So I plan to do, I've tried to radio track more Barbastelle, and I've had, I think, 3 rounds of fairly unsuccessful radio tracking in that. I think one time it just disappeared off the site and those trees were no good to us because we didn't have access where it was roosting. I think the other times it just didn't move very much. I'm planning to do some more radio tracking to increase the number of Barbastelle roosts. I think we've kind of done Becksteins now, and as you may have picked up from the kind of photos and videos and things, that it's kind of easy to do things like woodpecker holes because they're very discreet and you can put a camera quite close to it. But the larger features are a bit more challenging. However, the one that lasted, what was it, 4.5 months, that long duration one that I showed you before, I kind of had that series of videos of kind of other species at the end. That is a very long feature. It's probably about 1.20 meters, so fairly decent. It's more challenging. It's definitely more challenging because the further you are away from the feature, then the higher the likelihood that you're either going to get kind of more sky or foliage that's moving around. The main key really is that anything in shot needs to be have as kind of limited movement as possible. So if there's any ivy on that feature, strip the ivy off. If there's any foliage, try and move that out of the way so the camera is just focusing on wood and feature in the center of it, but kind of the trunk of the tree or the branch of the tree, because that's the kind of way you reduce the number of false triggers. Karis kind of hinted earlier on about the number of kind of bits of the data set that had to be dumped because a piece of epicormic just kind of came in front of the camera and was doing this, and you have like thousands of triggers per night. So it is doable. but it's because you have to be further away to get the length in, just need to be mindful that you try to be extra vigilant to remove any moving foliage and things like that. Cool. I plan to have some videos. I've recorded some already. I plan to release some of those. So alongside the kit list, I actually plan to release some videos of how to set them up, or how we've been setting them up, with kind of guidance on distance and things like that. So things like removing foliage and what have you. But yeah, that will be coming hopefully at some point in the new year. But I think that just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hopefully we will see you again soon. Cheerio.